The night Clara finally knocked on my door, I was standing in my kitchen, mechanically chewing on a stale croissant from that morning and drinking black coffee out of a chipped mug. That detail alone is probably enough to paint a picture of the glamorous life I was leading at 33. It was 11:42 p.m. on a rainy Thursday, the kind of heavy, relentless rain typical of northern England, the sort that turned the window panes pitch black and made the entire century-old apartment building sound like it was breathing heavily in the wind. I had a deadline the next morning, a half-finished architectural restoration draft of a 19th century abbey open on my laptop, and absolutely no intention of speaking to any living creature until at least Saturday morning. Then came the knock. 3 quick taps, a pause, 2 softer ones. I knew it was her even before I turned the heavy brass doorknob. Not because Clara and I were close, quite the opposite. That was the core of the problem. I had spent the last 4 months making absolutely sure we were not close. She lived in flat 4B and I lived in 4A. We shared the same worn velvet carpeted hallway, the same poorly soundproofed brick walls, the same temperamental iron cage elevator, and the same view of the Gothic church spires across the cobblestone alley. Clara had moved in at the beginning of October, dragging along a massive cello case, 3 mismatched Art Deco reading lamps, and a laugh that could pierce through the old brick walls like a beam of warm light. I noticed her immediately. Of course I did. Clara was 31, a violinist for a local symphony orchestra and a music teacher. She had natural chestnut curls that she usually pinned up haphazardly with broken violin bows, and her wrists were more often stained with rosin than adorned with jewelry. She had this dangerous way of looking at people, right into their eyes, as if she were truly, deeply paying attention to them. That was incredibly dangerous, especially if you were a man trying very hard to be forgotten by the world. And I was exactly that kind of man. After my engagement fell apart the previous year, I had built a fortress of a life that was aggressively simple. Work, take-out food, and absolutely no emotional attachments. To anyone who might one day stand in my kitchen and calmly explain that continuing to love me had become an inconvenience, then Clara moved in next door and ruined the quiet. During her first week, she borrowed my folding stepladder. When she returned it, she left a basket of warm, freshly baked Earl Grey scones. I deliberately ignored that basket for 2 whole days because accepting homemade food from a strange woman felt exactly like the first step into a cautionary tale. But then, in the middle of the night on the 3rd day, I stood over my sink and ate the entire batch. After that, I went on high alert. If I heard her deadbolt click, I froze and waited. If we happened to cross paths by the mailboxes downstairs, I pretended I had forgotten something upstairs. If she smiled at me in the hallway, I offered the bare minimum, a stiff, polite nod, the kind men exchange at gas stations. Brief and emotionally entirely useless, she noticed. Of course she noticed. One foggy morning in November, she caught me trying to sneak out into the stairwell with a bag of trash. "You know," she said, clutching her steaming coffee, "for neighbors, you and I are maintaining an incredibly impressive long-distance relationship." I should have laughed. I really wanted to. Instead I said, "I'm just not very good with humans before caffeine." She glanced at the dark coffee in my hand. "That cup is completely full." I looked down at my mug as if it had betrayed me. Clara smiled. Fascinating. That smile followed me into the stairwell and haunted me for 4 flights of stairs. So, when she knocked on my door that rainy night, I immediately sensed something was wrong. Not because she was fragile and needed saving, but because Clara did not seem like the type of woman who would knock on a man's door at midnight unless she had already exhausted 5 better options. I opened the door. She stood in the dim hallway wearing a burgundy velvet dress, the hem soaked from the rain. She was holding one high heel in her hand. The other was still on her foot. Her chestnut curls had come loose, clinging wetly to her cheeks. Her eyeliner was slightly smudged, but her chin was tilted up as if she had just fought the entire world and absolutely refused to let anyone see her tremble. For one brief second, I forgot every rational rule I had ever set for myself. Then she spoke. "Before you pretend you don't know me, I need a favor." My hand tightened on the brass knob. "Are you okay?" "That depends entirely on how convincing you are as a fake boyfriend." I blinked. Behind her, from the far end of the hallway near the elevator, A man's voice echoed off the stone walls. Clara, come on, just talk to me for a minute. Her eyes never left mine. It wasn't fear exactly. It was anger, embarrassment, and exhaustion. But buried beneath all those layers was something softer, something that made my chest suddenly feel very tight. Do you want me to call building security? I asked. I already did. The guard will be up here in 2 minutes. She slightly lifted her bare heel off the cold carpet. I just need this guy to stop thinking I'm alone. It should have been simple. Step out into the hallway, say a few intimidating words, close the door, and retreat to my cold coffee and emotionally frozen lifestyle. Instead, I opened the door wider. Clara's gaze flicked over my shoulder into my apartment, then back to my face. You're letting me in? I am not going to let you stand in a drafty hallway with one shoe while a terrible man monologues behind your back. The corner of her mouth twitched. That was almost charming. Don't spread it around. She stepped inside. The moment she brushed past me, I caught the scent of rain, cinnamon, and a hint of jasmine, probably from whatever shampoo women like Clara use to make men reevaluate their entire existence. I closed the door, but didn't throw the deadbolt. Through the thick oak, the man's footsteps approached. Clara, he called out. I know you're in there. She closed her eyes for half a second. I lowered my voice to a whisper. What's his name? Bastian, ex-fiancé, recently promoted to public nuisance. There was that sharpness again. Clara wasn't helpless. She had edges, and I liked that far more than I should have. I raised my voice just enough to carry through the wood. Darling, do you want me to handle this personally, or should we let security do their job? Clara stared at me, stunned. Something shifted in her expression. It wasn't exactly relief. It was recognition. As if she hadn't expected me to fall into character so seamlessly. As if she had expected me to stay cowering behind my door, just as I had for 4 months. The hallway fell dead silent. Then, Bastian muttered a curse in French that I didn't quite catch, followed by the heavy clank of the antique elevator arriving. Clara exhaled a long, slow, controlled breath. I waited until the elevator doors groaned shut before turning the heavy iron lock. Tea? I asked. She stared at me. Excuse me? You just fake boyfriended a man through a door to scare him off, and now you're offering me tea? I'm a versatile guy. A laugh slipped from her lips. Small, surprised, and genuine, and there it was. That was exactly why I had been avoiding her. Because making Clara laugh felt entirely too good. She limped slightly toward my kitchen, still gripping her shoe. Do you have anything stronger than tea? I have a dusty bottle of port, and a lot of unresolved psychological trauma. Tempting. But tea will do. I filled the kettle while she leaned against my marble counter, looking around as if she were uncovering my secrets against my will. The scattered rolls of drafting paper. The single fern she had once declared was bravely fighting death. The stack of clean plates sitting idle in the dishwasher I had been too lazy to empty. Her eyes landed on the chipped mug in the sink. Do you really eat croissants out of that thing? I glanced at it. No. Elias. I hated how incredibly smooth my name sounded coming from her. Fine. Yes, she smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. I pulled a fresh towel from a drawer and handed it to her. Our fingers briefly brushed as she took it. It was nothing, less than a touch. But the warmth of her skin shot up my arm like an emergency flare. She wrapped the towel around her shivering, bare shoulders and leaned back. Why do you avoid me? She asked, just like that. No preamble, absolutely no mercy. I opened a cabinet and slowly took down 2 porcelain cups, buying time I knew I didn't have. I don't avoid you. You once hid inside your flat for 12 minutes because you heard me talking to Mrs. Alvarez by the elevator. I spun around. How could you possibly know that? I could see your shadow under the door gap. I stared at the hardwood floor. She laughed again, softer this time. Relax, I'm not mad. You're not? No. Her smile faded slightly. I just wondered if I had done something wrong. That hit harder than it should have. Because she was standing in my kitchen, soaked from the rain, yet brave enough to ask directly about something most people would just silently punish you for not explaining. No, I said quietly. You didn't do anything wrong. Then what is it? The kettle began to whistle behind me. I could have lied. I was exceptionally good at those kinds of lies. Not cruel ones, just convenient walls. Work is crazy. I'm bad at socializing. I'm a private person. But Clara's eyes were locked onto mine, and for the first time in 4 months, I was exhausted from being a coward in my own hallway. So, I said, because you make my quiet feel unsafe. She froze. I cleared my throat. That sounded a lot less pathetic in my head. No, she said carefully. It didn't sound pathetic at all. Neither of us moved. Then, her phone buzzed on the counter where she had placed it. Once, twice. She glanced at the screen, and every drop of color drained from her face in a visible, sweeping wave. I looked before I could stop myself. It was a message from Bastian. Tell your boyfriend I'll see him tomorrow at your sister's engagement party. Clara squeezed her eyes shut. I stared at the phone, then at her. She opened her eyes and gave me a smile so fragile it looked like it might shatter on the floor. So, she said, her voice thin, there is one tiny little detail I probably should have mentioned. Your sister's engagement party? Yes. Tomorrow? Yes. And your ex-fiancé is now convinced I'll be attending as your boyfriend? She pressed her lips together. Technically, you invited yourself when you called me darling. I was improvising under pressure. You were highly convincing. That doesn't constitute a legally binding contract. No, but it had incredible emotional range. I dragged a hand down my face. Clara reached for her phone, then pulled her hand back as if the screen were toxic. I'm sorry, really. I never meant to drag you into anything beyond this hallway. The kettle sat between us, cooling by the second. I should have declined. Any sane man would have said no. I hardly knew her. We had exchanged maybe 50 sentences in 4 months, and at least 10 of mine were complaints about the elevator maintenance. But she was standing in my kitchen in that wet velvet dress, trying so hard not to look humiliated. And all I could think about was that Bastian had likely spent years learning exactly where to press to make her fold. I hated that. And even more inconveniently, I loved that Clara was still standing tall, refusing to fold. Why does he care if you bring a date? I asked. My family adores Bastian. She let out a dry, humorless laugh. Actually, no. My family adores the version of Bastian that he performs at Sunday brunch. And he's invited tomorrow? My sister's fiancé is his cousin. I winced. That is an aggressively hostile family tree, right? Her shoulders dropped a fraction of an inch. Anyway, my original plan was to go alone, smile until my cheeks cramped, and leave early. But then Bastian showed up tonight to talk sense into me. Meaning he wants me back. Seeing me single makes him delusional enough to think the door's still open. She finally picked up her phone and placed it face down on the marble. And apparently, my imaginary boyfriend just slammed that door shut. There was a faint, desperate hope in the way she said it. That hope completely undid me. I poured boiling water over whatever tea bags I had blindly grabbed. What time? Clara blinked. What? The party? No. She shook her head fiercely. Elias, I'm not asking you to... I know. You're not asking. You have work. I always have work. You don't even like parties. I don't even like most of humanity. The corner of her mouth lifted. That is true. And yet, she studied me for a long time. Rain streaked the glass behind her. The warm kitchen light softened the anxious tension in her face. Why would you do this? She asked softly. I said, because you brought me Earl Grey scones. Her eyes narrowed. From 4 months ago? They were exceptionally good scones. A real smile bloomed on her face, slow, radiant, and utterly dangerous. All right, she said. But if you're going to be my fake boyfriend, we need an origin story. We met because we're neighbors. Too boring. That is literally the literal truth. Romance requires editing. Elias. I crossed my arms and leaned back against the opposite counter. Fine, you tell it. She tapped her chin, evaluating me. At first, we absolutely loathed each other. I never loathed you, I know. But that's what makes the story compelling. I tried my hardest not to smile and failed miserably. She noticed instantly. Her gaze dropped to my lips for a split second, and the temperature in the room definitively shifted. Just a little, but enough. She looked away first, wrapping both hands tightly around her warm mug. We ran into each other when I needed a ladder. You were grumpy, but deep down, secretly kind. Secretly? You hide all that warmth under layers of wool sweaters and an impenetrable glacier of emotional frost. I'm not wearing a wool sweater today. Not physically today. But spiritually, always. I laughed out loud. The sound startled both of us. Clara's expression softened, bringing a sense of intimacy that felt far more profound than a physical touch. "There," she whispered. I knew you could laugh. Those words landed heavily somewhere behind my ribs. I stared down into my tea. For a long minute, we just stood there saying nothing, listening to the rain and the groaning of the old pipes. It should have felt incredibly awkward, but it didn't. It felt like the comfortable silence you only earn after knowing someone for years, not one rainy night. Finally, she spoke. "Your turn." My turn for what? Girlfriend interview. If we're performing this play, I need facts. Favorite food? Stale croissants, apparently. No, be serious. Italian. Good. Mine is any form of pastry that provides emotional comfort. Favorite movie? Rear Window. She pointed a finger at me. That explains so much. What is that supposed to mean? You're a watcher. I froze. She said it so gently, without any accusation, as if she had looked at the shape of my soul and wasn't repulsed by it. I wasn't always this boring, I said. Her playful tone vanished. Before? I didn't bother asking how she knew there was a before. Before my fiancé left, I replied. Clara's fingers tightened around her teacup. She decided, exactly 3 months before our wedding, that she didn't want a life that looked like ours, or rather, mine. I shrugged, though the gesture carried the weight of a boulder. A quiet apartment, work deadlines, staying home on weekends. Me. That was cruel. It was honest. Those two things can exist simultaneously. Clara took a tiny step closer. For what it's worth, quiet doesn't scare me. I looked deep into her eyes. No? No. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Lonely is what scares me. The air between us grew impossibly thin. She was standing close enough now that I could spot a tiny fleck of gold in her left iris. Close enough that if I just reached out, my fingers would brush the damp hair clinging to her cheek. I didn't do it, but I fiercely wanted to. And wanting felt like the first dangerous risk I had permitted myself in a year. Clara set her cup down. We should practice. My brain instantly supplied several wildly unhelpful interpretations. Practice? To look convincing. Her lips twitched into a smile, though her cheeks flushed deep pink. Relax, tough guy. I mean holding hands? Right. Unless hand-holding is too advanced a skill for my emotional glacier. You're actually enjoying this. A little bit. She offered her hand. I stared at it for one ridiculous second, treating it like a complex legal document before finally taking it. Her hand was smaller than mine, radiating heat from the tea mug. Her fingers laced through mine with a careful, steady confidence, a simple touch, completely innocent. Yet it hit me with the force of a freight train, far harder than Bastian's text had. Clara took a sharp, quiet breath. I glanced at her. Okay? Yes, she answered, but her tone had shifted completely. You? No. Her eyes widened. I mean, yes. I chuckled softly in my throat. Faking this isn't going to be difficult at all. There it was. Too much honesty. Her fingers tightened their grip on mine. No, she whispered back. It won't be. For a fleeting moment, neither of us was pretending. But then a loud, harsh buzz shattered the quiet. Not her phone. Mine. I reached for it with my free hand, keeping my other hand locked with hers because letting go suddenly felt like an offense. The building's front desk number flashed on the screen. I answered. Mr. Elias? The night porter's hesitant voice came through. Apologies for the disturbance. There's a gentleman down in the lobby demanding to see Miss Clara. He claims he left his coat in your apartment. Clara's face turned to stone. I looked down at our joined hands, then back up at her. This time she didn't look like she was fighting alone. She looked at me as if she wanted me right there beside her. So I gave her hand a reassuring squeeze and spoke clearly into the receiver. Please inform the gentleman he is mistaken, and if he refuses to leave the premises, call the police. I hung up before the night could steal anything else from us. Clara swallowed hard. Elias. I'll be there tomorrow, I said. Her eyes searched mine. At the party? I nodded. As your boyfriend. Her thumb gently stroked the knuckle of my index finger. Fake boyfriend, she corrected, but neither of us sounded the least bit convinced. The next day, at 2 p.m, Clara knocked on my door. This time, I opened it instantly. Her eyebrows shot up. Were you standing right behind the door waiting? Absolutely not. I saw your shadow under the gap, Elias. I looked down. She laughed, and that was when I truly looked at her. She was wearing a stunning navy silk dress beneath a camel-colored tailored coat. Her chestnut hair was pinned up elegantly, allowing loose curls to frame her neck. Small pearl earrings, sweet boots. She looked radiant in a way that made my brain forget the basic mechanics of the English language. The engagement party was held at a restaurant situated inside an old stone castle in the city center. It was filled with warm crystal chandeliers, crisp white tablecloths, and a sea of people who knew Clara far better than I did, yet stared at me as if I were an alien life form. As we walked into the grand hall, she seamlessly slipped her hand into mine. She didn't ask this time, and I didn't hesitate. Her palm rested against mine, fitting perfectly, like the answer to a question I had refused to ask for a year. Are you okay? I murmured. Not at all, she replied in a bright, cheerful tone through a dazzling smile. But your hand is very warm. I nearly tripped over the flat floor. Her sister Emma spotted us first. She was bright and bubbly, with a diamond ring large enough to require its own zip code. You made it. Emma hugged Clara, then turned her unabashed curiosity on me. And you brought someone. Clara squeezed my hand. This is Elias. Boyfriend Elias. Emma pushed. Clara shot me a glance. It was a tiny window of escape. I could have played it safe, remained polite and distant. Instead, I lifted Clara's hand and pressed a soft kiss to her knuckles. A very lucky Elias, I replied. Clara's lips parted in shock. Emma made a noise that only sisters can make, equal parts sheer delight and the plotting of future blackmail. Oh, I adore him, Emma declared. Clara managed to recover by elbowing me in the ribs the second Emma turned her back. That was not in the script. You said no dramatic declarations. That was merely a subtle, continental gesture. That was advanced-level boyfriend material. I told you I was versatile. For the first hour, our performance was flawless. We recited our edited origin story. She claimed she fell for me when I washed the scone container before returning it. I swore she seduced me with pastries and harsh critiques of my dying fern. Her aunt asked how long we had been dating. Clara smiled. Long enough that he knows never to speak to me before I've had my coffee. And long enough, I added, that I knowingly risk my life to do it anyway. Clara turned to me, eyes narrowing playfully. He enjoys dancing with death. Oddly, I wanted to keep doing this forever. Standing close to her, trading witty banter, feeling the physical tension leave her body every time I publicly chose her, not just acting as a shield, but behaving as if the world seeing her desired actually mattered to me. Then, Bastian arrived. I felt her hand turn to ice a second before I spotted him. He was handsome in that slick, overly manicured way of men who spend too much time checking their reflection. A perfectly tailored navy suit, a smug smile, and dead eyes that locked onto me immediately. Clara, he said smoothly, you look stunning. Thank you. He stared pointedly at our locked hands. And this must be the neighbor, I smiled politely. I'm Elias. Bastian shook my hand, squeezing much harder than necessary. I let him. How sudden, he mocked. Clara's chin went up. Not really, no. It's comical, actually. Just last month you told your mother you weren't seeing anyone. The small circle around us fell dead silent. My old instinct flared up, the urge to fix things, to step in front, to make myself useful. But Clara didn't need a wall to hide behind. She needed someone to stand beside her, so I waited. She took a deep breath. Last month I wasn't ready to talk about him yet. Her thumb stroked the back of my hand. A choice, Bastian sneered. How convenient. I turned my head to Clara, completely ignoring the man in front of us. Would you like to get some fresh air? She looked up at me, gratitude and something much warmer shining in her eyes. Yes, I didn't spare Bastian a single glance as we walked out onto the restaurant's covered balcony. The biting cold of the winter air hit us first, followed by the quiet. Rain fell in silver threads under the glow of the street lamps beyond the awning. Clara let go of my hand, only to wrap her arms tightly around her own body. I'm so sorry, she said. If you apologize to me one more time, I'm going back inside to tell your aunt we actually met in a juvenile detention center. A laugh tore from her chest, shaky but real. I stepped closer to her. You handled him brilliantly. I wanted to throw a bread roll directly at his face. Does that count as handling him? She looked up. Under the dim balcony lights, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. Thank you for not speaking for me. The words were simple, but I understood the heavy price she had paid to learn them. You're very easy to trust, I said quietly. She went completely still. I hadn't meant for it to sound like that. So quiet, so honest, so raw. Clara's gaze fell to my lips once more, and this time she didn't dart away. Elias, she whispered. This is starting to feel a lot less fake. My heart hammered against my ribs. Is that a bad thing? I don't know. She took a step forward, close enough that her wool coat brushed against my suit. I'm trying to figure out if I'm terrified because of Bastian, or because of you. I don't want you to be afraid of me. I'm not. Her hand came up to rest flat against my chest, feeling the frantic heartbeat underneath. That's exactly the problem. The sound of the rain filled the silence. I slowly lifted my hand, giving her all the time in the world to pull away, and gently tucked a damp curl behind her ear. She didn't pull back. Instead, she leaned her cheek into my palm. That tiny surrender completely broke me. I avoided you, I confessed, my voice rough, because I knew that if I started wanting you, I wouldn't be able to do it halfway. Her eyes softened into liquid warmth. And now, I'm standing on a balcony at an engagement party, desperately hoping my fake girlfriend will let me kiss her. Her breath hitched. Then, Clara rose on her toes and closed the distance. It was gentle and hesitant for exactly 2 seconds. Then her fingers twisted into the lapels of my jacket. My hand slid down to grip her waist, and the entire miserable, lonely year behind me vanished into thin air. She tasted like champagne, rain, and a beautiful risk that I wanted badly enough to finally stop pretending I was fine without it. When we finally pulled back, she stayed pressed against my chest. That, she breathed heavily, was definitely not a requirement of the contract. No? She shook her head, but it was highly convincing. I smiled against her temple. For the first time all night, the tension melted from her body as she leaned her full weight against me. The photograph taken later that night should have been harmless. Just Clara and me standing beneath a string of fairy lights. Her mother demanding we stand closer. Emma making heart signs behind the photographer's back. And my hand resting firmly on Clara's waist as if it had always belonged there. After that photo, the party became infinitely easier. Not because Bastian left. He didn't. But because Clara stopped shrinking whenever she felt his eyes on her. Around 10 o'clock, we found ourselves at a tiny table by the window, sharing 2 slices of Victoria sponge cake. It felt dangerously like a real date. Clara pointed her silver fork at my plate. You eat cake like a man with deep-seated trust issues. You're leaving all the frosting for last? I'm saving the best part. Exactly. You're terrified the joy is going to run out. I stared at her. She froze. That was supposed to be a joke. A brutally accurate joke. Her face softened. Elias! I scooped up a generous piece of frosting with my fork and held it out to her. Here, eat this before you decide to psychoanalyze the dessert course. She looked at the fork, then up at my eyes. Are you hand-feeding me cake in public? Apparently, it's either incredibly romantic or shockingly bold for a man who used to hide from you in a stairwell. You're evolving. She leaned forward and took the bite. Her eyes never left mine. Good frosting, yeah? Very trustworthy. Then Bastien materialized beside our table, instantly tilting the axis of the night again. Clara, he commanded. We need to talk privately. No, she replied calmly. He glared at me. I wasn't asking him. But I was the one who answered, she shot back. Bastien's jaw clenched so hard a muscle twitched. Do you honestly expect anyone here to buy this act? 4 months of living next door, and suddenly he's the great love of your life. The accusation stung. Not because he was right, but because I desperately wished he was. Clara stood up slowly. The only thing I expect right now is for you to stop humiliating yourself. Bastien leaned in, dropping his voice to a vicious hiss. You're making a massive mistake. No, she said clearly. I made a massive mistake 2 years ago. Right now, I am correcting it. A flash of pure malice crossed his face, followed by cold calculation. He turned his dead eyes to me. Ask her what the real reason she called off the wedding was. Clara turned pale white. For a fraction of a second, I wanted to smash his face into the table. But Clara simply turned on her heel and walked away, heading swiftly down the quiet corridor toward the cloakroom. I instantly moved to follow. Bastien stepped directly into my path. She hasn't told you? I looked at him, feeling the coldest, hardest part of my old self wake up. Move, he smirked. Careful. Fake boyfriends shouldn't get so emotionally invested. I'm not invested because of a title, I said, my voice lethal. I'm invested because she's Clara. I shoved past him. I found her at the far end of the corridor, standing beneath an oil painting of a harbor. Her arms were wrapped tightly around herself, her face turned to the wall. I'm here, I said softly. She quickly wiped under her eye. If you came to ask what he meant, get in line. It's apparently the hottest topic of the night. I came out here because you left. She let out a sharp, painful laugh. That's not an answer. It's the only answer that matters right now. She turned to face me. The raw vulnerability in her expression punched a hole straight through my chest. I didn't end it for some noble, dramatic reason, she choked out. I didn't catch him cheating. He never hit me. There's no clean, acceptable story that makes people nod in sympathy and stop asking questions. I don't owe anyone a clean story. Her lips trembled violently. I left. Because one morning, I realized I was actively practicing how to make myself smaller before I even ate breakfast. I had to be quieter, more agreeable, less opinionated, less tired. Less me. She swallowed hard, tears finally spilling over. And then he told me he loved me because I was so adaptable. I stood completely still, letting her purge the poison. That was it. That was the grand scandal. I left because I refused to politely disappear from my own life. I closed the distance between us with slow, deliberate steps. Clara, what? I'm so incredibly glad you didn't disappear. More tears fell, but this time she didn't try to hide them. I reached out for her hand. She gave it to me instantly. I hate that everyone expects me to have a better excuse, she whispered. I placed her hand flat against my heart. Refusing to lose yourself is the greatest reason there is. She stared at our hands, then stepped forward and rested her forehead against my chest. I wrapped both arms securely around her, not for the crowd, not to spite Bastien, not as part of any performance, just because I wanted to hold her, and she desperately needed to be held. I'm not adaptable at all, she mumbled into my jacket. No, I'm fiercely stubborn. I overwater my plants. I grade my students' tests using glitter gel pens. I talk back to the screen during movies if the characters are being stupid, an absolute monster. And I will eat every single olive on the table, even if I didn't order them. Now that is just going too far. She let out a wet laugh, and I kissed the top of her head before my brain could tell me not to. She looked up. You keep doing that? Doing what? Choosing me even when no one is watching us. Clara, I said, my voice thick. That is the only time it actually counts. We walked home through the misty chill of the Scottish night. Halfway there, she slid her hand into my coat pocket, where my hand was already waiting. "No one is looking at us," I said. "I know." Her fingers tangled with mine in the dark warmth of the pocket. That was the exact moment I finally stopped lying to myself. When we reached the door of flat 4B, she turned to face me. "Do you want to come in for a minute?" Yes, her apartment was exactly what I had imagined, yet entirely surprising. Color was everywhere. Sheet music was scattered across the sofa. A cello stood in the corner. A painting easel was set up by the window. She went to the kitchen to put the kettle on. I wandered over to the easel. It was an oil painting of the exterior of my building at dusk. In one softly lit window, a man stood looking out, holding a coffee mug. Me. I turned around slowly. Clara was frozen in the kitchen doorway, caught red-handed. "I am not a stalker," she blurted out quickly. I like painting windows, the light, people passing by. You just happen to be there quite often." I looked back at the canvas. For months, I had convinced myself I was the only one watching from the shadows. "You saw me," I said. Her voice softened to a whisper. "Yes, I always saw you." The truth settled over the room, warm and terrifying. Both our phones buzzed simultaneously. Emma had sent the photo from the party to the family group chat. Underneath it, a text from Bastian. "Enjoy playing house. It won't last." Her smile vanished. I took a step toward her, but she raised her hand, not to push me away, but reaching out for me. I crossed the room and took her hand tightly. "Stay?" she asked, her eyes fearful but resolute. I threaded my fingers through hers. "Of course." "I'm staying." I stayed. Not with a dramatic movie-like declaration. I simply sat on her blue sofa, holding her while the silence stretched out. "I don't want tonight to be defined by him," she whispered eventually. "It won't be." "How do you know?" I turned to face her fully. "Because when I look back on tonight, all I'm going to remember is you stealing my dessert and the way you kissed me on that balcony like you were exhausted from waiting for me to be brave." Her cheeks flushed. "I was exhausted from waiting. And for the record, I didn't think you needed rescuing. I just wanted to be beside you." Her eyes searched mine deeply. "You really see me." "I do." The words were quiet, but they echoed in the small room. Clara reached up and traced my jawline with her fingertips. "Then say something real." I swallowed. I could have chosen 100 safe things to say. That I liked her. That tonight was surprising. That we should take things slow. All true. All entirely insufficient. I was deeply lonely before you moved in, I confessed. I lied to myself and said I liked the quiet because it was easier than admitting I had been left behind. But then you showed up with your cello, your messy sheet music, and your suspiciously perfect scones, and suddenly, my peaceful life felt like a locked panic room. Her eyes filled with tears again. "I never want to go back into that room," I said. "Especially not if there's a chance you're standing on the other side of the door." Clara's breath caught. And then she kissed me. This time, there was no performance, no audience, no pretense. Her mouth was warm, certain, and grounding. Her hand slid into my hair as if she possessed every right in the world to touch me, and I desperately wanted her to. I wanted the beautiful chaos of her apartment, the brilliance of her laughter, and the terrifying vulnerability of truly being known. When she finally pulled back, she rested her forehead against mine. "I don't want to fake this anymore," she whispered. "Neither do I." "So, what exactly are we doing?" I laughed softly. "We are horribly negotiating our first official date immediately after pretending to be deeply in love in front of your entire extended family. That sounds exactly like us. Dinner tomorrow night?" She tilted her head. "Are you asking as my grumpy neighbor or my fake boyfriend?" "I'm asking as the man who wants to be your real one." Her smile bloomed slowly, beautiful enough to make my chest physically ache. "Then yes," she said. "Dinner tomorrow." 6 months after that rainy night, we quite literally tore down the wall between us. We moved into a sprawling, light-filled apartment on the 5th floor. Clara filled it with vibrant colors, sheet music, and the low hum of her cello. I filled it with oak bookshelves in order. Together, we filled it with a kind of quiet that would never, ever be mistaken for loneliness again.